Okay, so now my swatch is, I've finished several rows of the alternating front and back post half double crochet, and you should be able to see these ridges, both on the front and the back. It's supposed to look like knit ribbing that make that pattern using the front and back post half double crochet. I've also done my single crochet round that leads into the waistcoat stitch, or the single crochet knit stitch, whichever you want to call it. And I'd like to just, again, let's do a little bit of stitch anatomy. Okay, so normally when you're working, let's say a single crochet, you do your yarn, start my chain one for the row, but you're going in underneath these horizontal bars to make your stitch. When you're doing the waistcoat stitch, you're actually going in between the legs, the vertical legs of the stitch. So you have leg one here, leg two there, and you're putting your hook in between those. And then on the back side, there are also two legs. So if you can see my hook kind of poking through here, there's a leg here, there's a leg here, and then there's a bar that goes across the top. So you want it to go through with that bar coming over the top of the hook. That tells you you're in the right place. Okay. If I worked this single crochet round the way that I would normally single crochet, I would not have been able to do that just now. So I'm going to actually back out a couple of stitches and show you the difference. Okay, so I've worked the single crochet round that I just did is worked the way that you're going to want to work it before you begin the waistcoat stitch. If I just work normally, so this is me working a normal single crochet. All right, I'm just working along, going under my bar, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through. Whoops. All right, so here's a stitch that I worked prior to the video. All right, and here's a stitch that I just worked. So if I try to get my hook in between those legs of the big stitch that I made, I can get it in there fairly easily. I can get the hook through, okay? If I try to work in between the legs of one of those stitches I just made, it's going to be very difficult. So I kind of butt the head of the hook in there, and I'm using my, nope, slid away. Try again. So I'm using my fingernails to pry apart the stitch in the back. I'm using a fair amount of force to get the hook through, okay? That would not be worth doing for anyone. Trying to make every single stitch that way would be, well, you'd ruin your nails if you have them, and you would be so frustrated because you need a lot of space to get through, okay? When you're working into the single crochet round is going to be the hardest round of making the waistcoat stitch. But even that can be alleviated by working as follows. So when I work the single crochet round, what I'm doing is I'm going to put my hook through and pull up a loop, and I'm actually going to pull that pretty tall. I'm going to cinch that edge so it doesn't cinch down. I'm basically holding the yarn where I've made that loop so that when I pull through, I have a nice tall stitch, okay? So if we look at this stitch that I just made, all right, so there's this loop right here going around is going to become this vertical bar, and then here are my two legs that I'm going to have to work through later, all right? So if I'm cinching those loops down, it's going to be too tight to get my hook through. So you want to work the single crochet round very loosely. You want to make nice tall single crochets. You almost want to be loose. Believe you're loose. Think loose. Think tall and loose the whole time you're working. Not just the single crochet round, but when you get into the waistcoat stitch. So the way that this this stitch is made, when it's done, it's going to look like you knitted this part of the cowl. It's going to look like knit stitches instead of crochet stitches because of where you're working. As long as you're keeping those single crochets, so first round single crochet, when you're working into it, if you keep them loose when you work them, it will be easier to get into them. Every round after that depends on working the round before loosely. Okay? So you're pushing your hook in between those legs to the back, making sure that wow, I just lost my train of thought. I'm so sorry. There's a loop that goes over the top, but you're going between the legs on both sides, basically. But you still want to make sure you're pulling those stitches tall and working them loosely, because every single row after depends on the work before being made loosely. The biggest problem I have making the waistcoat stitch is I get in a rhythm and then I forget I'm supposed to be doing it loose. So then I get to the next, I'm doing fine. This round's so easy. I'm getting into each stitch and I'm not even having to think about it so much, and it's going really quick. And then I get to the next round and I realize it's because I've gotten used to it, I've started to cinch my stitches down again. So when you're working into that single crochet round, you're taking the head of your stitch, or head of your hook, going in between the legs to the back, making sure that that bar is going over the top of your hook. Yarn over, oops, pull back through, nice and tall, yarn over and pull through too, all the way around, okay? And that will be, that's the basics of working into the single crochet row. Now, let's talk about the color work. So when you begin this round, you're not just working into the single crochets. You're actually doing the beginning of the waistcoat stitch and the beginning of the color work at the same time. So I'm going to back out to the beginning of this row, and we're going to talk about carrying, well, doing the color work and carrying your colors. All right. So you know what? It would have been really nice if I'd started this row with a chain one. All right. So to begin this row, I am going to continue with this color, and I'm going to work the first almost 4 stitches. Okay, so 1, in through the middle, 2, 3. Now, when I make this 4th stitch, if you look back at the notes section, you will see, let's see, it's the 4th note. It says, changing color in a round before working the last yarn over to complete the stitch, and before the new color, drop the previous color and grab the new color to finish the last yarn over of the current stitch. So when I make this stitch, I'm going to yarn over and pull through. And then to make that last yarn over, I need my new color, which I didn't know where the end was, and now there it is. All right. So I'm just going to tuck my end down in here, and I'm going to gently drape that over and use that to make my yarn over and pull through. Okay. Make sure I have a nice long tail. And this is the beginning of the color work. Now, every stitch I make, there should be a piece of yarn from the unused color floating along the top of the fabric. So when I go to make this next stitch, I'm going to use my new color. I'm going to take my hook. I'm going to go in between the legs of that single crochet right there and come out the back. And you're going to see that above my hook is the fabric and the unused yarn color, okay? So I'm going to make my yarn over, and that you can see it's going around not just the fabric, but the old color, okay, and pull through. Now, because I'm only making 1 stitch in this color, I actually need to switch back to the old color to make that final loop again. Okay, pull through, and now my color B, my lighter color, is going to float along the top. Well, I make 7 in the old color. So I'm going to make 1, through the middle of that stitch. And you can see my yarn, my unused light color is floating along here at the top. Yarn over and pull through, nice and tall, pull through. 2, through the middle, and then my yarn over, it's coming over this unused color, which is just floating along the top, pull through, yarn over, pull through. This is stitch 3. As you can see, I'm just kind of allowing this unused color to glide along the top. I'm not pulling it taut, but I'm also not letting it bunch up. All right. So this is stitch 4. Through the middle of those legs, yarn over, pull through, nice and tall, loose stitch. 5. Pull through, loose stitch. 6. Loose stitch. And now when I make this 7th stitch, remember the last yarn over is going to be my new color. So I'm going to go through the stitch, yarn over and pull through, and then the final loop, I'm going to drop that old color and pick up the nude color to make that final loop. And then this darker color is going to float along the top while I make 1 stitch. So I'm actually going to go through the middle of the legs, yarn over and pull through, and then I'm switching back to my dark color to make that final loop. Your yarn may get, so you can see right here, because of the way I dropped and picked up, that now I have a twist in my yarn. I find the easiest way to deal with that is just kind of get to the end of the round and then flip your project around if you need to untwist. If you're really, really diligent, you can figure out how to drop. So for instance, you're always dropping 1 color to the front and always dropping 1 color to the back. You should be able to ensure that your yarn doesn't get twisted. But I know that when you get started, there's a lot. This row has a lot to think about. So you might just want to concentrate on getting good at, for instance, making the waistcoat stitch and getting the color work right, and then worry about making sure your yarn isn't twisting, if that helps. All right, so I've made 1, and then I need to make, let's see, 7 more of my dark color. So that's 1, 2, 3. Remember, we're making nice, tall, loose stitches here. 4, 5. Whoops. Yes, sometimes that will happen. Just make sure your other yarn is just kind of floating along here. I gotta count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, so 5. So when I get to my, this is 6. All right, so my 7th stitch, again, I'm going to begin with the old color, nice and tall, and then that final loop is going to be the new color. So drop that yarn to the back, and then I'm making 1 with this color, which means I go through those legs. Did I get through those legs? Yes. Yarn over and pull through, and then we're back to the dark color to make that final loop. And then we're just allowing the light color to float along for the last, let's see, 1, looks like 3. 2, and I can already tell a couple of those stitches I just made, I did not make as loose as I should have. So normally I just back out and redo those stitches to make sure they're nice and loose. 3. All right, so then I'm going to join my yarn for the beginning of the round. And I just wanted to go ahead and continue, let's see, let me get that out of the way really quick. Showing the next round, just so you can kind of get a feel for the yarn that has been floating around the top, along the top. Note to self, when you join for the beginning of the round, don't make it so tight next time. All right. Let's see, so round 2, we're going to do the same thing. So we do our chain 1, and then this white, or the light color yarn is just going to float along the top here while I make the same number of stitches. All right, so in between the legs, let's see, got all right, so there's 1, and again, if I were doing my actual project, I would have gone back and loosened up some of these stitches that I realized after I made them were too tight. So 2 should not be this tight for you because you're making your stitches nice and loose, right? 3, nice and loose. 4. All right, so this is the part where the previous round started a new color. So again, I'm going to make the next stitch, or the last loop of this stitch with the new color. And now, let me get my tail out of the way. Hey, Mr. Tail, come here. All right. So for the remainder of this round, if I can show you, pull my hook out here for a second. When I go through the remainder of these stitches, you can see the V right there, and you can see the little light colored yarn sticking out above where my hook is going to go through. So for the remainder of the color work, when I put my hook through to the other side, that bar that was going over is also going to have the unused color is also going to be going over my hook when I put it through the stitch for each stitch. Okay, so it's a good way to tell where, am I putting my hook through the right place? Yes, because if you've got that unused color going over the top of your hook when it goes through, oops. You know that your hook is in the right place on the stitch. Okay, so that's kind of the front of the stitch at the bottom of the V. Okay. All right, so I just used the new color to make that last loop, and now my tail wants to come up again. All right. So then I'm making 1 stitch with the light color, and you can see when I go in through the V that not only are the bars going over, but there's my unused dark color. Okay, grab a loop, pull it through, nice and tall, and then remember I'm dropping the old color, switching to the new to make the last loop. Make a few more in the dark color. So I know it's a lot to keep track of. You're putting your hook where you don't normally put your hook, and you're having to kind of wrestle it through unless you've made your stitch tall, but then that would require also remembering that I'm making my stitch tall. And look what I forgot to do. I forgot to carry my color. So I need to just back out a few stitches. All right, I'm gonna go back to where I made this loop right here, because that was the last time I had the light color. And then I'm going to make sure that my light color is coming along underneath, along the edge of my work. All right, so I'll go through and just make sure that that light color is hanging out at the top. Yarn over, pull through, nice and tall, make a stitch, go through, make sure I've got my unused color from the previous row at the top of where my hook comes through. Make sure I've got my color running along the top. Make my loop, pull through, make sure it's loose, make a stitch, and so on and so forth. I promise you, this will get faster. This will seem easier. I know it's a lot to put together all at once, but once you do it, it might take you 2 hours, 3 hours to do one round the first time you do it. But you will get faster. It will get easier as long as you can try to start keeping in mind, okay, each stitch needs to be loose. Each stitch needs to have the unused yarn from the previous row above the hook when it goes through. And each stitch needs to have the unused color running along the top. So I know that's a lot to keep in mind every single time you make a stitch, but it will get easier. It will start to become intuitive, and eventually it will look like you've got a nice piece of what is actually single crochet knit stitch, but looks like knitting. I really hope that that's helpful. I know that that's not the best tutorial in the world. I don't have any illusions that that is the case. I guess it'd be a delusion. I don't have a delusion that I'm making awesome tutorials or anything, but I hope that that's at least helpful to kind of help you visualize where the stitches need to be, what they need to look like, and how they get made. And if you have any more questions or if there's anything else that I can show you to help, just let me know. Thanks.